Welcome. Feel free to come to the front, and I appreciate it's the last session, so some of you might want to run at some point with your luggage. It's absolutely acceptable. So just come to the front, so at least we can see you, because with the lights, people past the third row, we can't see if we've got an impact. Anyway, welcome to this very last session of this year Learning Technology Conference. You clearly use stamina. You all looked quite bright and perky. That's amazing. Thank you. So for those of you who just joined, while we're doing the intro, feel free to contribute. It will disappear. You still be able to contribute after it disappeared from the screen, but you won't be able to access the QR code when the session starts. So we're happy to collect your questions, your comments, and I'll try to gather some questions, some trend, and when we start the Q&A. Yesterday, Don Taylor opened the conference, for those who were there, with reminding us that learning technology is great, it's fascinating, but it is an end it's not an end, it is a mean to a purpose. And a lot of what we've seen during the Q&A are about purpose and the purpose of the learning, the impact we have. So it is something we should probably keep in mind, because the presentations today on virtual reality are going to be very inspiring. But the reason those cases have been successful is that because they were setting up for a clear impact, for a clear purpose, and that's why it is a success story. So by the end of the session, we would like you to have the answers to why, what, how it works. So we're going to start with our first session. It's going to be more about the why of virtual reality, how does it work, what purpose it serves, and we all have maybe some preconceived ideas, to go back to today's keynote, about what is virtual reality, what does it do, how much it costs, how much technology we need, and maybe it's changed since the first days of virtual reality. Andy Fidel, who creates a social experience for remote communities working with VR, will tell us a little bit the range of possibility that VR. And then followed will be two very good case studies about more traditional industries, so something many of us can echo to, which we will share how they made in organizations that were not necessarily the most creative or imaginative in our way, VR a success. So without further ado, I would like to invite Andy to kickstart this last session.
Yay. Hi everyone. Today I'm going to be talking about putting extended realities for work, for learning. So a little bit of an introduction. As technology advances, so do the ways that we communicate and share knowledge. Just being able to transport yourself into a virtual world where you can interact with other people as if they were right here with you is just one of the many transformative powers that immersive reality has when you mix it with digital communications. Immersive tech is transforming not only the way we learn, but the way we work and the basic way that we communicate with one another. And so I want to start off by what is our reality? And so in here, I've added challenges, actually learning from what challenges people are facing here at this conference in the conversations that I've had in the hallway. And so there's keeping up with the rapidly evolving industry. It's providing ongoing training, learning, and development, not only keeping up, but adapting to stay ahead of the curve. And then we need to balance growth and innovation with sustainability and limited resources. We know that traditional training is expensive and hard to deploy. It can often fail to keep learners engaged. And then finally, with our remote workforce, digital communication, that gap is hindering productivity and culture. And so immersive learning, what's interesting about it is that it has three solutions to this. It's scalable, it's efficient, and it's globally accessible. And we're going to explore some examples that really inspired me throughout the time. And right now in 2023, I know the talks that we've had about the metaverse and VR and AR, It's evolved. Our hardware isn't the same, it's smaller, it's cost-effective, we've got enhanced software, we've got really cool whiteboards in VR now. And we have also a bunch of case studies and best practices to inspire us. So one thing that I really want to encourage is to go beyond the hype. Don't read the media, don't read those titles, actually go in and meet the people that are making this change. Because to define the metaverse is like trying to define Narnia. I don't know what the metaverse is. To be honest, I don't quite care. What I care about are the communities in these spaces, the available tools and platforms, and the frameworks that we're building and we're going to be implementing in the future. One thing that we do have available to us are spatial networks. This is a coin that I turned in 2016 because I needed a different word than VR and AR and XR and MR, and then in Latin and in French and in Spanish, it's the other way around. So in terms of SEO, it just didn't work. Spatial networks are social platforms using immersive technology, VR or AR, and they enable people to create content and share content or participate in spatial networking. The verb spatial networking is a form of digital communications that facilitates the creative process of sharing 3D assets, interests, information, and all kinds of human expression. And like I said here, I didn't really add the word headset, and we're going to get into what makes spatial networking interesting is that it doesn't necessarily actually even include VR. These are some of the brands that I consider to be spatial networks. You probably recognize a few of them here. We've got VR Chat, we've got Fortnite, we've got Rec Room, we've got Engage, and we've got new ones popping up. What makes a spatial network? Because it's not just about the VR aspect. There's a huge difference between a spatial network, an app, and an experience. And it came down to 4 pillars. Number 1 is embodiment. The fact that I'm stepping into a digital or a virtual avatar, I have a sense of presence, and people will recognize me for my sense of presence. I am who I am in virtual reality. Secondly, is that we have a common reality. It is a shared experience. I'm in this world, and you're in this world with me, and we're experiencing similar things together. Then there is engagement, right? There's the fact that I can actually communicate with the people around me, whether that's verbally, but also body language. That's one thing we didn't have in digital, right? When we're on our little screens and we're in these little windows and we have to stand up straight, you don't see what happens in here. We all kind of actually even feel and look socially awkward. Versus in VR, you know, if I'm happy, I'm going to be spinning around. And if I'm feeling actually a bit uncomfortable, you're going to see my body language actually kind of, you know, go backwards to whatever it is, really. But you get a sense of who that person is in VR much more than you do in digital. That's the real-time communications. And the last one is my favorite, is impact. The fact that we can have an individual and collective impact on the environment. So interactives, whether I do something and it changes for myself or for everyone around me. And if you think of it, you think of any digital platform or app out there, do they have these 4 pillars? Then it might as well be a spatial network. So now we talked about spatial networks, why integrate it into your learning tools? And so here, today I'm liking the number 4, sometimes it's 3, today it's 4. 1, to be memorable. 2, to be reactive, bridging the digital gap, and scaling and distribution. And we're gonna get into it. Being memorable. I didn't pick the firefighters, took something different today. One of the strengths of VR is the ability to replicate real-life situations and to provide learners with a sense of presence and immersion. And sometimes these aren't great real-life scenarios. I'm taking this example of journalism and media training, but it could be applied to manufacturing, it could be applied to security, it could be applied to healthcare, being a surgeon. But it's the concept of role-playing. I get to be embedded in a situation that's either dangerous for me to try in the physical space, or quite honestly, it's just costly, because if I mess up, maybe I just spent $30,000. Here I can do it again and again. And one thing that you have in VR is the fear that you have in real life and the anxiety and our reactions are quite similar in VR. Your reaction in VR, it's going to be quite the same, but you can work on it, right? You get exposed to it. And so you're developing skills, you're developing experience through trial. This is a really cool example. I love it. I'm actually quite nervous public speaking in the physical world. I love it in VR. And so I'll use this tool to kind of practice even some harsh scenarios like a media ambush. Like, let's say everyone here is really not liking the metaverse. But the fact is that you can try things and you can scale on it and you can work on it. Another thing about being memorable is that there are hard skills, right? There's actually, like we talk about digital twins and really learning about specifics in training, but there's also soft skills that we can practice in VR. Being a better manager, having more empathy, wellness, any soft skill. And for that, we can also play with virtual reality. We can have a world that's a little bit more poetic and bring a sense of wonder and awe. Definitely take a picture of this person, Caitlin Cross. If you don't know her, she's quite fabulous in the VR scene. And this quote that she has is, "Designing wonder is all about world dreaming and experience building." I'm leaving these slides for you. See, these are just notes that I just said verbally, summarized. Second thing is about being reactive. Like I said, we live in a world where it's constantly changing and there's new things coming up. 1 month it was the metaverse, then it was NFTs and Web3, and now we're talking about generative AI. It's going so fast. This is a really cool example of a space. It's over here in Rec Room. It's called the Creative Campus. And there are ongoing workshops where educators and students and teens, whatever you are, whatever the age, there's no age in VR, there's only knowledge and empathy and energy. But there are constantly workshops on diverse topics, things that matter to people, things that people are trying to understand and to learn on a constant basis. This is a persistent virtual hub. If you come in here, any curiosity you can sign up for a workshop and actually attend it, or apply to create your own workshop. But it's a place that I go to sometimes just to see what's going on. What are people teaching and what are people wanting to learn? And the ability that you have to pivot and to create content is quite rapid. Here's just a few examples. Again, how it looks like. You see the content, you see your thumbnail, you apply for it. In terms of virtual tools, another thing about being reactive, I'm going back to the example of virtual speech, is the capability to process information in real time and to provide learners with feedback. So when I do my public speaking, it'll tell me how confident I was, how much did I stutter, did I actually look at my interviewer in the eyes, stuff like that, so I can try again and actually have the data to be able to progress. Bridging the gap. This is another one. Please take a picture of this group, Educators in VR. Every time I come and speak about learning or education, I always bring attention to this group here. Immersive technology nurtures a vibrant and diverse culture and community. This is a group of people that are meeting on a weekly basis, multiple times a week, and again, bringing educators across the world to talk about VR and to talk about the issues and challenges we have and the solutions. Again, it's very fast-paced. As soon as something comes out in the news or there's a new trend, there's immediately an event and there's immediately training available. Again, you wouldn't have this sort of community in the physical space. I can't just fly to London and then go to the States and then go to Vegas or Australia as fast. This is a picture when I was working on the social media team. That's actually me in Thailand talking at a conference. And we got everyone else to kind of send their pictures from all over the world. Real people behind those headsets. Scaling and distribution. So taking that, I love the example of Accenture, who really took it to the next level. A lot of our events or a lot of our initiatives may be concern a couple hundred people, but Accenture here actually brought over 60,000 Quest 2s and brought their employees during COVID to come to this campus that you can access at all times called the 9th floor. And they did the onboarding, which was collaborative and social, but also learned about everything that Accenture does, learning about your team, learning about management. It's a constant space, a persistent space that you can use as an employee to do quite anything. Another thing about scaling and distribution is, again, VR is not just about the headset. Believe it or not, we're not all in our headset 9 to 5 all day long. I probably spend about an hour or two like everyone else. I start getting a little bit of a headache. Like I said, our hardware is getting better. One thing I do love in VR, though, because I do spend over 5 to 10 hours in VR, is using the iPad or using my mobile phone. Some way, somehow, I've got a tab and I am in some immersive space. And there are ways that you can scale this. You can have people participate and kind of go back and forth. Other thing, too, that you're going to hear about the metaverse is being interoperable and interoperability, which means when you're building things now, and you're not just building it for one platform, or for one medium, but it's about creating things that I can take and transpose to different platforms and different mediums. Let's say I'm doing a beta in this free platform with available tools, then I'm going to bring it into my own custom app and custom platform, and then I'm going to create an AR version of it. I can take this data, I can take this content and keep building upon it. And so as we go on to the next people, for me, the takeaways I would love you to have is see and know that there are accessible starting points, to have the curiosity and inspiration just to try it in 2023, and engage your community, because it's really quite engaging. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andy. So yes, there is a lot more to VR than just, as we say, sometimes solving technical issues for complex environments, such as firefighter, which was something we discussed. It taps into neuroscience. It can also help with social connections. And it was a great way to get inspired. But now I would like to invite Sodi, who is going to tell us how it worked for ScotRail and how it made it work. So Sodi, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Anne. That was really very, very interesting. I've got a different aspect to what I'm going to be talking about this afternoon to what Andy was talking about. It's how I put it into practice in a real environment that we have within ScotRail. So the challenge that we have in ScotRail at the moment is we have to train a certain number of train drivers per year so we can actually continue running the service that we run for the public. It's 160 a year, as you can see there, up from 126. Now that puts an awful lot of strain on our driver trainers in more ways than one, and I'll talk about that in a little while longer, but it takes a fixed amount of time to train them, 16 weeks and a minimum of 263 hours for the instructor to be with them on a train. We can't cut that down, but what we can do is make it more efficient and keep them to that 263 rather than increase it. On average at the moment, it's about 290 to 300 hours of that instructor-led training on a train. So we can reduce it. 16 a month is what the figure is we need to get through. And we have full-size train simulations now built into our offices in Glasgow. And they're timed lessons, timed sessions on those, and they're finite. Can't extend it because of the number of trainees we have to get through. And the PowerPoint training that existed and still exists is really PowerPoint heavy. On average, it's 190 slides per module. So you can imagine sitting through that day in, day out for 16 weeks. Not very good fun. The team behind the project, well, it was a newly formed team. We came together January 2022 when I joined. There are 3 very inexperienced developers. They were developing things on Rise, and that was about as far as it was going. So very quickly we had to upskill them as well. We had some resistance, but not very much. The most resistance we had was actually from the driver trainers who thought we were going to be replacing them with this virtual reality. No, we're not. We're actually going to enhance what you do and let you be more efficient at what you do. So we had to prove to them how we could do that. Sponsorship, very little resistance really. There was some resistance because they thought it was going to cost hundreds of thousands of pounds. The truth was far from that. It's 1/5 of that, to be quite honest. And then the developers were worried because they were learning new tech, going to have to learn some more new tech. How are we going to do this? So that was a bit of resistance, not much. Where we got least resistance was from the learners. They thought this was going to be the best idea. So we actually surveyed the driver trainers and the recent trainees that went through and some old train drivers who'd been driving trains for 10 years plus. All thought this would be a great idea and something we needed to do. So I gave us a 6-month window to actually get from finding a vendor to piloting to actually going live with something. We did that, and I'll explain how we did that as well. So try before you buy. So I had the idea we had to prove something, and we had to show the driver trainers that we could do something pretty nifty with what we already had. So what we did, using just a 360 camera, was video the inside of a train from one end to the other, and we built a train presentation course for the people that clean the trains. They now use that instead of classroom-based training. So again, we've eliminated a 2-day course They do this in about 2 to 3 hours, and it's there for them to use when they need it. So finding the right tool. Lots of research went into it, narrowed it down to 3 providers, and then I asked them for demos, and more demos. Demo to me, my team, demo to stakeholders, and demo to the trainer drivers. That was fundamental to the success of moving forward. So they were involved in assessing the technology that we were going to be using. So why did we choose RUVR? Well, there are a couple of things that were quite crucial to us. One was the way that they work with us. It wasn't just we're a vendor, you're a customer. They actually instill this partnership basis. They came, they demoed, I can't remember how many times, but I think it must have been 6 or 7 times in total. So that was one of the major things. We can create a virtual safe environment that the train drivers can experiment in. They can crash a train if necessary. We can put scenarios together for them that they don't usually get the chance to experiment with. So that safe environment was pivotal again to the success. But I think the most important thing that they had in the RUVR platform was the remote supervision, where we could put a trainer in there in a virtual environment with trainees from anywhere within the network. So they wouldn't have to come together in our Glasgow office. They could do this remotely. Fantastic. As soon as they saw that, I was literally asked, just go out and buy it. So what we did was pilot to partnership. We piloted a course, and a very simple course, a rail side safety course, which each trainee has to go through. And it takes 2 days to do this course. We've now allowed it and built something that allows them to go through it in 4 hours. Big success for us. It's been rolled out. Every new trainee is using this now, and we're now looking at the next phase. So what's next for us? Well, we're going to be incorporating the scenarios that we've taken from the train simulations, the full-size train simulations. So what's happening with those? They're being downloaded. We're taking them. We're putting them into the RUVR system, and we're changing the scenarios. We can now build on those scenarios, and we've just started doing that. In fact, last week was the first one. We're playing around with it, and we're working with the driver trainers, and we're building brand new scenarios that are going to be outside of the simulators, so they can experiment even more and play more with it in their own time. And the new virtual onboarding program, we've just begun designing that as well. That's going to be designed to be a blended solution. So quite a lot of that will be, pre-onboarding will be in the virtual scenario where we're showing them where you'll be working, who you'll be working with, and you can wander around. You can see where your desk will be. You can see which depot you'll be based at. You can see what kind of train you'll be trained on before you actually get to start your job. The next phase for us, and a big project along with the driver trainers, is engineering, something we haven't even tackled. And for them, virtual reality is really important. We don't have the engines for them to experiment and play on. So the only way we can do that is to build a system that allows them to do that virtually. And then the next big one as well, and all these are running in conjunction with each other, by the way, is safety training and accessible travel. Really big for us. Safety is a prime object for us, is make sure that every journey that we undertake is safe for our customers. And accessible travel, we've got to make our trains accessible to all. Our service has to be accessible to all. So we have a program where we run every year an accessible travel course. That alone takes 2 days to do as well. We're looking at building a course that can be interactive, which will take half a day. More importantly, we're going to make that available to our customers as well, so they can see how we serve them, and they can experiment in a safe environment. I'm wheelchair bound. How will I be served? How do I get from A to B? So those are really important things to us. And as I say, pilot to partnership. The partnership is pivotal to the success. RUVR are offering their services to come and help us start building the next range of courses and train our people on the job to be able to create the content. I think we're probably about, I'd say, 6 to 9 months away before I'm confident that my team can take on building everything without the support from RUVR. And I think we'll get that support. And that's it from me.
Thank you so much, Sadie.
Thank you.
So great presentation from Sodi, where we can really see that evidence that it can cut time for the learning experience. And we're going to deal a little bit with some of your questions, but I just wanted to point out that, we want to probably address frictions, but first of all, I would like to introduce Michelle and Sean, who is going to share another case study about how they're using and developing virtual reality in the context of the medical world.
Thank you, Gail. Those who haven't guessed, I'm Sean. Michelle's going to speak in a minute. We're both from NHS England, and we want to talk today about how we're trying to bring immersive learning into health and social care, really. And we're looking at how, not just how supported, but enabled organisations across the health sector to start to use immersive learning. So to start off with, who we are, who's NHS England? For those who are not within health, we take our mandate directly from the government, Department of Health and Social Care. And then NHS England's role is to basically manage and oversee the NHS within England, similar bodies in Scotland, Wales, etc. And then myself and Michelle sit in the TEL team. And our job in the TEL team is to look at how can we use learning technologies, push it out, support education, training, and basically the workforce is our priority, really. But ultimately, the objective is what we do improves patient care. So again, how can we help doctors, nurses, clinicians across the system improve patient care, and how can immersive learning do that? So what we need to do, again, those who don't understand health or not work within health, there is huge pressure on the system. You see it every day in the news, limited capacity, not enough resources, not enough time, and we need to work differently, really. We're still recovering from COVID, and I'm probably one of the few people in health that actually see a benefit to COVID, actually. COVID forced us to change, and we had to then a large shift to work remotely, digitally, virtually. And I don't know those who saw the speakers yesterday, David Kelly mentioned in his talk yesterday about emerging technology, about how within crises, seeds of opportunity occur. And that's what COVID has been for learning technologies, is it was always a bit of a afterthought, a sideline within health and education. Since COVID, it's integral, it's forward. We have to use it, and that's been recognised across the board. So who do we work with? Again, NHS is huge. There are 1.3 million people work within health across the UK. As an example of the different organisations we deal with, again, the easiest way to look at that is education, so that's universities, further education colleges, medical schools, healthcare directly, so the hospitals, mental health trusts, hospices, etc., GP practices, and then also social care, so care homes, local authorities. So obviously, myself and Michelle, the team, we can't work with everybody. So how we do that is we have a very active TEL community. There are people in all these organisations who are, as a couple of you here today, I spoke to earlier, TEL leads, L&D leads, who are trying to do this on the ground. We're there to help and try and support and enable it to happen, really. And so if you look at the TEL community, this is a word cloud of all the different job titles and roles that are there. And you can see the whole spectrum, so everything from digital, e-learning, IT, systems. We're trying to work with everybody, and everyone does it slightly differently. That's part of the problem. There's not one consistent approach, but hopefully, as a community, we can start to steer and move in that direction. And one of the things we are picking up with immersive learning is that there's a real drive, a real ambition to move from what, I don't want to offend them, but traditional e-learning, next page, and then assessment at the end. How can we get to something that's a bit more engaging, a bit more interactive? How can we move to immersive learning? And so that's really what myself and Michelle and the team are trying to do. So how we try and do it, again, it's massive, it's huge. So we try and take a holistic approach, look at the bigger picture and look at all the different building blocks you need, really. And this is where I sort of come up with this diagram, really. So if I start with hardware, across England, we're divided into 7 regions. So from the northwest, northeastern Yorkshire down to southeast London, southwest, etc. And we set up these things called XR hubs in each region. And what that does is they have a whole range of equipment, HoloLenses, HTC Vive headsets, River kits, 360 cameras. And it's like a library. So organizations can approach their regional hub and borrow that equipment to test it out. Or we also run pilots from as well. So if they want to use HoloLenses in surgery, they can go and try it before investing in that money. Last thing wants to happen is load of money wasted, buying loads of headsets that just sits on the shelf and never used. So this allows people to try before they buy, see if they've got the infrastructure, see if it's the right technology, and if it is, then they go and get it. The next step there is content, and I'd argue that's probably more important. There's no point giving everybody a load of headsets if you've got nothing to put onto it, really. So it's the content now that I think is key. The more content we can generate, create, share, get the system to use, the better. The more user cases there are, more people will be using it, really. And one of the models we have is this shared software license to support content creation, help people develop the content, and that's what Michelle's done a focus on. I'm going to talk about it in a second, really. The move around to support, we have a range of guidance, resources available for people to access. We've also started these new roles called immersive learning technology officers, and they're again based in each region, and they can go out on site to trusts, to hospitals, and help them adopt and deploy the technology. Help them set it up, make sure it's working, but also on hand to support various pilots, check in every week, how's the pilot working, are they achieving what they've set out to do, what are the problems, the barriers they're facing, and help them overcome them, really. The central hosting bit is then how can we start to join this up, really. Within TEL, we've created a platform called the Learning Hub. Some of you may be aware of also e-learning for healthcare. It's another one of our platforms. That's going to be merging onto the Learning Hub. And we see the Learning Hub as a central national system, freely available to anybody within health and social care. And it's a collaboration model. We encourage people to put content on there, share their materials for the greater system, for the greater good. So last thing I want to see is someone creating a piece of content in one hospital and then hospital roads duplicating, creating the same content. Let's share that resource. Let's maximize the efficiencies, the value for money we can get. And again, all the stuff we're creating around immersive learning is freely available there on the Learning Hub for people to access. And the final bit then is around engagement. We have active TEL and simulation networks in each region. We run forums every quarter, most of the time virtually online. And it's understanding what do the people on the ground need? What are the problems they're facing? Or what are the best practices that we can then scale up, share wider? And it's making sure the work we're doing nationally is relevant to what they need on the ground, really. And some of the things that come out of that, we run CPD sessions all year. And the CPD sessions we choose come out of what people need, what areas do they need support in, what skills, etc. So that's the bit where, they come from what people ask for. You ask for it, we then try and put it on. So try and support that community, give them the skills then to move into this immersive learning space. So I'll move on. Well, I'll hand over to Michelle now. And again, I appreciate immersive learning. It's huge and the stuff that Andy and Sodhi talked about. But we're just on focus on 360 video for this bit. So I'll pass over to Michelle and she'll take it from there.
Thanks very much, Sean. So we started the process of engaging people into extended reality with 360 video. Isn't it dreadful? And the reason is it's quick, it's inexpensive to create, and doesn't require a large amount of technical skills to start. We find that there's been a number of examples of how people have used it. Majority, of course, as you might expect, onboarding and orientation. And this is where COVID, again, as Sean was saying, really came to our benefit. We find that L&D teams were starting to use 360 content for virtual tours. Prior to this, we were finding that 360 content really was only being used by simulation groups for clinical aspects, but now it was actually widening and being used. And L&D teams love the fact that I could use a headset, a mobile, or just even a plain PC for what I needed to do. Other areas where we find a lot of examples are the preparation for placements, the experience of unusual settings. Here we're demystifying the unknown and we are setting it and managing expectations. You can see from the picture, it's a prison cell, and we've recently released a program called Nursing in Prisons. And it's an aim to get nurses to consider working within a prison environment. Now, I'm not making any judgments, but I'm pretty sure for most of us, we don't know much about prisons. We don't know what people are like. We don't know what it looks and what cells look like. So here in this session, we see a cell, we talk to prisoners, we talk to prison officers. We see exactly what a clinical setting will look like. And for nurses, the only difference really is there are some bars on the window. Everything else is much the same. And we are hoping that this sort of program will reduce those concerns and fears that people have about considering this placement for work. One of our aims has been to get every trust to have the minimal or all of the tools that they need for content creation. So using our Platinum Suite from eLearning Brothers, we have includes both e-learning and 360 VR creation tools. We use a shared model license. We have 20 licenses available, and they're available for anyone within the NHS England environment. The licenses are set up so that they are open. I can use license 1 today, license 2 tomorrow. I'm not tied to any one specific license. And this has been a really big change because it's reduced bottlenecks that we have during busy times. It's also meant that in quieter times, people can actually use the available space. Our booking system isn't anything fantastic. We use a web-based calendar system, and it works. It's fantastic. You just log in, take this is what I'm going to do, and off you go. We don't ask a great deal about our users in terms of what they produce. It can be, most of what we're looking at is localized content. What we do ask, though, is that everything is created under Creative Commons, which means it can be shared with the community. This means that every user has access to what everyone else is creating, both for sharing purposes and reuse, but sometimes for more important things like inspiration. We often have those difficult subjects, and seeing how someone else has tied and dealt with them can make life a lot easier. There we go. In terms of costs and benefits, well, for those 20 licenses last year, we spent around about 30K. And from that, we've seen 54 organisations use our licenses. That's 98 users from there. I will say that for some users, they start with us and then they go and buy their own licenses because they realise, I'm going to be doing a lot more than I thought I was going to be doing. So, and we've created around about 104 pieces of content. If you do the maths, it works out to be around about £500 per organisation. And as Sean was saying, we're a little bit cash strapped. That's actually a really good saving. And it works out that each bit of content that's created and shared is around about £300, which actually isn't too bad, and I think pretty good. Most of this learning and content creation is really about local trust learning, so orientations for this or how this is set up. But we do create national learning. And this is an example of one of our national packages, Enhanced Health in Care Homes. Really hard to say at 4:30 in an afternoon. And it is about how care staff can look after their residents a little bit better and some of the issues that they may come across. How do you deal with a patient with dementia who sees their long dead husband? Do you humour them? Do you tell them straight out, no, he's dead, just get on with it, you're not being sensible? How do you encourage someone to eat? it is apparently a fact that as you get older, sometimes you just forget to eat. And one of the aims of a care home assistant is to encourage those people to keep and maintain their health. Okay, there we go.
Health Education England, with NHS England and NHS Improvement, have created a new immersive training resource with scenarios for the 7 priority areas in the Enhanced Health in Care Homes programme. To help you get to know the residents, you'll be able to look at their profile and extracts from their care plan. You'll see signs of deterioration and make decisions on the best actions to take. In some scenarios, the residents' vital signs will be measured. You'll have the option to record these onto a news chart. You'll use the S-bar tool to help pass on only the most relevant information. You'll see the outcomes for each resident.
You feel like you're almost there. It's a great way of training.
Over other methods of training, I would prefer this.
I wish I'd been given an opportunity like that when I first stepped into care.
So the future. So this is only really the tip of the iceberg, and 360 video, again, appreciate it's only an entry point. We can do a lot more, and we've got a lot of ambition to do that, really. So where we're going, I think the first thing is we need to build the skills within the sector to make sure we can start to utilise immersive learning, whether that's 3D developers, Unity developers, etc. I'm noting organisations are already starting to recruit this type of role to their wider L&D teams. And again, that foresight, that ambition, we're looking to work with them, but also looking at the existing e-learning developers. A lot of them have an interest in this area and are looking to upskill, reskill and move into it. And how can we support and enable that, really? And that's where some of the CPD stuff comes in. We've started a 3D special interest group looking at this, looking at what the professionalisation of roles, what skills are needed, what does the learning technologist of the future need to have, really. So again, that's sort of some stuff we're looking to support and enable. But also then from a service delivery perspective, mental health, for example, have come to us and are really interested in using XR technology. And so we've got another group with mental health organisations, practitioners, looking at how can immersive learning be used to support mental health. Huge area. If you look on the floor downstairs, there's a couple of stands specifically looking at how VR can support mental health. And again, they're looking at from a workplace perspective. We're looking at how can you put that in, what's the patient user perspective? How can immersive learning be used to prevent their escalation? So can you prevent someone going on to secondary care, escalating, deteriorating? This is a preventative measure to then, it saves the NHS money, but actually that patient, that user stops them having an incident, a crisis, So that's yeah. Look at some of the wider applications. Again, health is used simulation for a number of years. This just extends that use further, really. Andy talked about that safe space VR gives you. You're not going to kill a physical patient in a virtual environment. And so you can practice, make sure, get those clinical skills honed, make sure when you do then have to deal with that in the real world, you've had that practice, that experience. So then you're hopefully more confident, but also more competent. Virtual placements. One of the big pressures in health is we need more doctors, more nurses. The issue is there's not enough physical clinical placements. We can't take on more doctors because we haven't got the placements for them. We're now starting to look at virtual placements. So how can people do some of that placement time virtually, which frees up those clinical places so we can then bring more through that supply line, bring more doctors and nurses and clinicians through and have a larger workforce, really. Remote supervision. You have a consultant here in London doing a specialist case, a trainee up in Newcastle. Virtually they can join together and they can then get that learning experience, observing that specialist case that wouldn't maybe happen up in Newcastle, or they'd have to wait, months or years to see. They can then see that, and that is really great for the trainees across the country, ensuring that equitable access. They can see then that the whole breadth and depth of clinical experience they need. And the last one, around artificial intelligence, is It seems to be a theme from the conference of the last 2 days, and we're starting to look at how we can start to use it really as well. But again, using it within the virtual space, and how can it start to tailor, personalise your learning training. So if you look at our curriculum with clinicians on, we could potentially accelerate the time someone does that curriculum based on where they're at, or if someone's struggling, we can give them a bit longer to complete that, and that's where the AI can come in and support, and then identify, you need to access this particular scenario, and then through the immersive learning, we can then provide that really. So that's a whistle-stop tour of what myself, Michelle, the TEL team, and NHS England are trying to do to democratise immersive learning, get it rolled out across the health system. Last slide is a whole list of links and resources that we've, some of the things we've talked about today, available for you to look at. Again, mine and Michelle's details are there, so again, reach out to us, and if you need anything, we'll happily help you.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you. Big round of applause. While you're thinking about the questions you're going to ask, I'm going to invite our presenters to join us on the stage. So it was, I think, based on some of the questions you sent on the Mentimeters, it probably hit the right spots. We can see through the different cases how virtual reality can really embed the learning through experience, create memories, so that all links with everything we heard in the past few days about neuroscience. When I look at the processes, I noticed that both cases starts with first engaging with the stakeholders and trying to break the resistance and the frictions through demo, try before you buy, start small. So really getting the stakeholders to be with us. Now, obviously some of the resistance and frictions is due to cost and equipment. And there was a few questions about the equipment. It's been touched upon during the session. So if you want to ask again about the equipment, please feel free to raise your hand, and the lady just there will bring you the microphone. Do you have any, before I go with my own question, and I've got a lot, but I think the reason you're here is to learn and to apply. So if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hand, and we really would like to address your questions. Thank you very much.
First of all, thank you very much to the panel. And maybe also a question for all four of you. So looking at virtual reality, you can definitely see an impact on the time spent on training, taking it from a classroom or a in-person training, and then using virtual reality and reducing that onto only hours. And you also saw the impact or the feedback from the users saying they really preferred it. But how have you, as responsible for that learning, been able to document the impact of that training compared to previous formats, rather than just having end users and providing their perceived impact of the training?
Well, how we will gauge whether or not it's been successful with the learners is that we'll achieve the minimum amount that they need to achieve to become compliant with the course. So that's the 16 weeks and the 263 hours of physical training with an instructor on a train. If I can keep it to this 263 hours or something close, that's a success to us. So we'll be actually getting the drivers through slightly quicker, because at the moment that's the minimum, but we're hitting about 290 to 300 hours. So for those 17 odd hours I can cut off, that's a couple of days training. So that's how we're hoping to do it. Does that answer the question?
I can add as well. Another example is on Michelle's slide, she mentioned about use to support OSCEs. An OSCE is like a physical assessment of someone's competency to do a procedure. With the virtual reality, if you practice that clinical skill, home it, and then when you still have to do the physical assessment, what we're starting to look at how we can measure that. Are people who've gone through the virtual reality training, are they passing more that assessment? Are they demonstrating more competency, and is it quicker compared to somebody who's maybe done a traditional method? And we don't have that data yet, but that's some of the areas we're looking at to try and address that.
Can I just jump in and ask, did you compare? So did you organize really some comparison groups?
We can see, again, we can see that, I suppose, that learner journey someone's been on. So if someone's had access to the VR compared to traditional methods, we can then measure that way.
Fantastic. Andy, do you have any data on your side, which is more about the connections and the collaboration? No?
Not data, no. Mine's social. Mine's about people, more their retention and experimentation. I'm seeing a lot of community members trying things that they might not have tried. I want to be an architect. I want to be a singer. I want to be a manager. You get a chance to actually dip your toes. And so seeing a little bit more risk being taken in social VR.
Brilliant. Thank you. Any other questions? There. Thank you.
Hiya. Amazing session. Thank you very much to all. My question's around accessibility, and for some of the public sector bodies, I work in public sector for the fire service, and we've recently had the public sector accessibility regulations and web content accessibility regulations coming into play, and we were set to sort of do some research and find out about what different platforms were providing and so on and so forth. And I'm not sure if everything within this remit sort of comes under the accessibility regulations, but I wondered how you're tackling these issues, you know, more around neurodivergence and disability, sort of even things from text, colours and background colours and all these different elements.
I'm not an expert in accessibility, but we've just produced a resource guide on accessibility for producing 360 video. So again, happy to share that with you to help you. We also have an accessibility group looking at this, and so like where within e-learning, there's a lot of work now making sure that's accessible. I'm sort of flagging now, how do we make sure that moving into the immersive learning space, that is equally accessible, meets those standards, those guidelines. It's still emerging, but we're looking to try and, well, address it and answer that before regulation catches up with us, and we have to answer that. So we haven't worked out yet, but we're working on it. I don't know if that helps you, but yeah.
And from our perspective, we're looking at EQIAs, Equality Impact Assessments, to see if we can get up to the criteria necessary. We don't do it with the driver instructors and the training because they have a medical they have to go through. So colour blindness, for example, is one that wouldn't allow them to become a train driver. But for the rest of it, we are looking at the EQIAs.
Thank you very much. So, very excellent questions. Do we have any other questions? Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone for great presentations. My question is to Andy, specifically. I consider myself fairly tech-savvy, I have to say. Listening to you, I felt, wow, this is so far beyond what I'm comfortable with and familiar with right now. Whereas obviously this is a whole new reality that you just, you're fully immersed in. And you also talked about how you're, for example, more comfortable speaking in, sort of virtual realities than physically. How do you feel spending extended amount of time in those realities affect that physical presence? Does it help you? Does it stop you from being more comfortable? Can you tell us a little more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that I share quite often because I am someone that, you can say has a little bit of social anxiety. I've always been a little bit the quirky one, a little bit awkward, and sometimes have trouble in groups of people. And so VR, we kind of came this space, again, for experimentation. And I remember one of my mentors said, well, if you want to get good at public speaking, you got to speak more often. And I'm like, well, I'm not being invited to a conference every month or every week. And so when I was working on AltSpace VR, I hosted 1 to 3 events per day. And every day I hosted an event, and I had a tiny presentation. And it got to a point as well, I'm someone who's incredibly shy to dance. And I started seeing that my personality changed. I started adopting a bit of mannerisms in VR, the smiling, the being overexpression, and gotten to a point where they kind of merged. I love my personality in virtual reality. It's very eccentric, but a little bit it kind of brought into the physical space as well. I even found myself at a club, my friend broke his guitar, and I went up on stage and started talking to people and clapping, and all my friends just looked at me saying, "Who are you?" So I think it comes down to practice, and practice makes perfect, and we get comfortable with it. So I would say that, yeah, thank you, VR, because it has definitely made me a better person.
This is a very good point, isn't it? It's about practice, but it's not necessarily practice as in driving a train and crashing a train, which can only be done in VR. It can be done about other things, and I think that's what, Andy's presentation is great, to open possibilities and then move on to the next step. Like Sodhi's ones wanted to actually use VR to help the customers and not just only the employees and improve the customer experience. So thank you very much for that great question. We've got another questions over there.
Hi, thank you for a great presentation. So question to Sean and Michelle. I work in NHS, so I'll do a lot of OSCEs, etc. Do you foresee in a future where you might not even get actors, you might just have just VR sessions? Because what I find is, for example, if you're an actor doing a very intense session, by afternoon they're tired, and sometimes the people who come afterwards get a raw deal.
Sorry, do you mind repeating that? Sorry, I couldn't.
So do you foresee a future where VR would, or immersive technology will take over, and you won't need actors for OSCEs, for example?
Yeah. Oh, so you're comparing like VR, so obviously a physical actor doing an OSCE, gets fed up of being prodded all day, sort of thing. So I still didn't quite understand the question.
Because obviously that becomes a bit subjective. For example, when I did my OSCEs as a trainee, I was in the afternoon session, and I could see the guy was really, by that time fed up because he had been prodded 100 times. So do you think having an AI or, would take that subjectivity away?
Yes, I think potentially there is the opportunity, sorry, I apologize, but there is the potential for virtual reality to make that more standardized, more consistent. I think the issue is the regulators, them catching up and them allowing, so like the NMC, for example, has only just recently agreed for more simulation hours. So I think it's about, in some ways, this technology, it's all possible. It's waiting for the cautious approach of health to catch up with it, really. But what we can do in the meantime is generate that evidence-based, those user cases to then support that. So I would hope, longer term, it could be. And one example, I'm doing some work with dental colleagues at the minute, and we are looking at how we can use it for assessment, really. So, trainees, the issue they've got is trainees are spread out across the country. Could be remote, could be, quite rural, and how can you get supervisors out to see them? Potentially with remote supervision in a virtual space, they'll have the confidence to be able to sign them off being competent to then practice. So I think there is lots of opportunities. It's about health's natural conservatism catching up with that. Does that answer your question? Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
That's a very good question. So can I just link to one of the questions we received on the Mentimeter, who said, well, is VR, the question was around, is VR, because of the equipment, limited to the classroom? So, you need to go to a place to put your headset on and do, but clearly with the tools that you've been promoting, you don't need to do that. It can be used by remote work first. You're just using a tablet and a phone.
We can do that, certainly. You can have autonomous training. But there is also still the need for the subject matter experts to come in and provide their knowledge. Just going and pointing and experimental learning is fantastic, but having people come in and do that remote supervision of a specialist in Outer Mongolia to somewhere in Liverpool is really quite, is an opportunity, much like attending a conference, that we all try and should take and that's one of those one of those really good things that we should be looking at being able to do to reduce that distance between people.
And sorry, if you've got a question, just raise your hand, but I'm going just bumping. I think one of the sessions has been in yesterday. It was about a leadership program, and I guess it is also about making it a little bit special and exclusive when you do this kind of event. It's just like, probably you'd want to do it in a way that if you do it like every other day, then maybe lose a little bit of the power, because I'll get to the next station, but then it become a real opportunity if it's something more unique where you can see the expert in the industry, right?
To the keynote this morning about that awe and wonder, fuels that learning and that interest. So again, I think people just experiencing the space, there is that initial wow factor. But again, I think there's also then the flexibility to adapt and move it, and the stuff Andy's doing, huge opportunities, where you can almost do anything in the space with it. So
I think it comes down to practicality as well. For us with the driver training, because I'll go back to that, because that's probably our most important project at the moment. It's not practical to give them each a headset. And we actually did a survey of recent trainees and I think they were trained drivers up to about 10 years experience as well. And 72% of them said that they'd rather just do it on the tablet that's provided rather than have the headset. So for us, that's great news, because it means we're not going to have to make a massive investment in buying all these headsets, which will probably end up being kept in a closet somewhere, and they just use the tablets that they're provided with. With the rest of the staff we have, they give them mobile phones. Up until now, the technology in the mobile phones and the tablets that people have had wouldn't allow them to run anything, even normal e-learning, because they just weren't up to spec. So we've actually influenced the IT rollout of the new tech that's going to be put to all the staff, because we say that at minimum we need this specification to be able to run the compliancy courses. Now that makes a difference. So we're influencing, so with what we're doing, we're influencing the rest of the business.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from attendees in the room? Yes, over there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My question is to Michelle, and it's about the cost of developing these training modules, because I retained one figure, which was £288 pounds per person, but it's only the license cost. What about the development? The people who developed the content, who worked on actually delivering these training courses, was there a full-time job, or they did it on top of everything else? How were they rewarded? And how do you calculate these costs as part of the whole budget? Thank you.
Really interesting and challenging question, so thank you very much for that. Now I've given myself some time to think of an answer. In terms of development, what we've done is that we've deliberately selected a tool that's extremely easy to use. We know that the same people who will be creating this 360 content are usually our e-learning developers, so that a lot of those skills are transferable. We haven't done enough costing to say, like for like, to say that 10 hours of development will produce 10 hours or 1 hour of 360 content. But what we are able to do is give trusts the ability to go out and experiment to identify whether it's a cost-effective solution for their learning needs.
And just to add to that, a metric we hadn't included on the slides, we have got the hours logged. So those, I can't remember how many, I worked out how many days a year, it was over 1,000 days a year development time.
1,091 days.
So we could work out that developer cost, because you're right, there is that's the invisible cost, the time of the developer. I suppose because we're not funding that developer's employed by that organisation, that's their cost they've invested in. So that is, I would go away and look at that figure, so I think that that's probably is an inflated cost. That's more of a cost of what the value of the software provided rather than maybe the true cost of that piece of content to be produced. So that's a fair question.
And part of the question you asked was about subject matter experts. They're given time in their work day to actually work with us. So for the driver training, they've given us 20% of their time towards being the subject matter experts, which is more than enough, to be quite honest. With the other side of the L&D department, we're getting 15% of their time to work on new content. And they will work exclusively on a project-by-project basis, so we get that consistency going through for each piece of content we develop, and that's working very well.
Sorry, can I just clarify? So for both case studies, you all have your internal team designing the content, so it wasn't the technology provider that, or did they help you at the beginning? How did that work?
Well, on the VR stuff, RUVR came in and actually handheld us to develop the pilot. We developed that in 6 weeks, which is quite a record because we were organised at our end. Because I have 3 members of staff who are instructional designers and have been creating since we started last January, they know how to do things and get the structure there, so that helped the process enormously. Usually they would go into a company, there wouldn't be anyone that knows about the development side of things. We helped on that, they helped us on the filming and the requirements we needed to actually get the software working. On the next project, it's going to be much quicker. I think we can probably get it down to 4 weeks' work. So it becomes really cost effective. And we didn't, as I mentioned, we didn't pay a lot for the license. In the scheme of things, it was probably a few thousand more than just having the Articulate license and beyond licenses we have for creating normal e-learning. And there are deals to be had, so don't be frightened to ask.
Thank you very much. We've got time for one last question. Anybody's got a question? Thank you. I think that's a question for the guys downstairs in the exhibition area. I'm sure they're willing.
But seriously, I'll find out what, I assume you're part of a trust. I'll find out who your trust is and we'll get you linked into. Yeah.
Brilliant. Any other questions? No, I'm conscious of the time because it's the last session of the last day, so many of you will probably go home. Please join me in thanking our wonderful panel for sharing their experience and expertise. And you can connect with them. They're all on LinkedIn. Some are on Twitter. Anybody on Twitter for the Twitter addict? Yes, and it is wonderful. So thank you for your time today, and thank you for your time today.